Hi, this is chapter 10 of Gaia's Retribution, which describes hell on earth, basically. And it's an autobiography of me as a slave in the system, but I was never anyone's slave. My soul has always been free. As I said, I was under the impression that I was going to hell because I was mean to men. I had only left men who didn't treat me well, and I never thought twice about it, but it was the only conclusion I could come to. How was I supposed to feel? I was sick my whole life, and now demons were after me. I also thought maybe I did something really bad in a past life, and now I had to pay for it. Self doubt and guilt are my so called demons. They are the things that haunt me. I thought I would eventually be going through a possession and didn't want to be alone for it. I didn't realize that I had been going through possessions since I was a kid. The possession was the illness. I had taken everyone else's damnations for them. I did. I get thought streams, like telepathic thought streams, so every so often I'll stop and acknowledge them. I was suffering so that my children didn't suffer, although I had no idea that that was what was happening. The two people I chose to date after that had happened to happen to be after that happened to be saints, but were completely damaged at end times. The truth is, I think that the saints in the Bible weren't saints at all. People who got recognized in the Bible weren't recognized because they did something good. It's because they did something for the church, and the church is an organized crime syndicate. So, a lot of the people that you're worshiping, um, a lot of them, other than the Virgin Mary, which was Mary Magdalene, which will be explained later. Um, there a lot of them weren't good people, but it's still possible that they were and then just damaged in end times. I looked for solace in someone, anyone at the time. The first saint was a closet junkie. He had said he once worked for the Albanians, roughing up people up for them when he was muscular. Now he's a scrawny drug addict. We moved into an old funeral home which became an antique shop. The back building was where the mortician took care of the bodies. One day I thought I should check his Instagram. I found a message to his ex-girlfriend stating that he wanted to see her. I got angry and I told him prior to never stop me if I'm trying to leave. He bear hugged me up against the radiator to get me to stay. When I broke away, he then went into the hallway to block me from getting my shoes. I gave him the right hook. Blood spurted from his mouth immediately. He praised my boxing skills and I blew by him to get my shoes. I went out for a walk, and when I arrived back, I was crouching by the cars near the back building where the bodies used to get embalmed, and I heard a woman breathing on me. She made this huh, huh sound, and I ran inside. I went into the bathroom area, and she sighed in my ear. I was terrified. Afterwards, I went home with him for another month. The entire time, I was completely bedridden after the COVID shots. I even got an abscess on my clitoris that hurt like hell. It was the size of a golf ball. The saint had asked me for my PIN number to my card when he went out to getting my script for me. He started putting me down for not giving him money to buy new vaporizers. He had stolen $1,600 from me by the end of the month. He had taken out the money at the PNC ATM local to him. He took his dog to the vet and bought drugs and was apparently high for the entire month, high on my dime. The second saint was an alcoholic. We slept in his car when he came over. He said one night he heard 3 knocks on the window and no one was there because I had been telling him about what had been happening to me. I told him what was happening and he told me he believed I believed it. I hadn't told a lot of people, I just didn't mention it. I didn't know how to tell someone something like that, but if he didn't believe me, then there was no point in being with him at all. His abusive rants were extreme. He tried to throw me out of his mom's apartment for nothing in a drunken state on Thanksgiving. I invited him for Christmas and got presents for him for my family. They all bought him something. When I was wrapping them, he was texting me what a whore I was. He had some excuse about taking an Ambien, but abusive people always have an excuse to be pricks. He showed up so pissed drunk that I had to hold him up in the bathroom to prevent him from completely missing the toilet. While I was with him, I went to a rheumatologist to have my shoulder looked at. I went to the doctor and asked for an MRI. He refused and did an x-ray. He said the only thing he would do for me was give me a cortisone shot. I told him they made me suicidal, and he said, "That's all I'm going to do for you. Take it or leave it." I allowed him to give me the cortisone shot, and very shortly after became suicidal. I was crying hysterically. I had done my makeup and dressed up and was walking to the bridge down the street from me when my brother saw me crying and didn't let me leave the property. I called Crystal Run Healthcare after the shot wore off and talked to the patient relations director. I told him what had happened, and he talked to me for over an hour. He fired the doctor for doing what he did to me, and it was one of the few times I ever felt justice for anything that had happened to me. When I caught COVID, I called the saint to keep me company, but I told him he couldn't drink as he was one of the most awful drunks I ever encountered. He left for a short time to go and get booze. The saint came back intoxicated and started berating me. He called me a whore from the opposite side of the room, and while I was just calmly sitting on the edge of the bed, afflicted with COVID, back aching, stomach hurting, he had no regard for me. He came over to me, pumped up in front of me, and said, "I don't know why I don't beat you by now." It was merely a few moments before I had him pinned against the wall, uppercutting him into the face. I threw him out and told the night clerk not to let him in. He had wanted to call the police, but I told him it wasn't necessary. The saint spent the night in the parking lot yelling at me from outside. Come morning, he was in my room going through my medication to try and steal my muscle relaxers. They had given him a key at the hotel because I went in with him. Chapter 11. That's when the Antichrist came for me. I changed rooms and David came over. He came over to me within minutes, laid me down, and nuzzled his face in my bosom. He looked at me with the biggest, most innocent eyes, and I knew he was home. He offered to take me to another place because it wasn't the nicest hotel, but I insisted we stay because I had already paid for it. I initially avoided David because he wrote to me on Tinder that his dad left him millions of dollars. I wasn't to be bought like that, but I ended up finding him incredibly endearing. We spent the rest of the month in bed and breakfast bouncing around. David said he had most of his stocks in cyborgs and was constantly moving money. He described it as the high of all highs, watching the zeros add up. I remain unimpressed as I do not value money, and in as much as money is a construct built to keep people's focus off enlightenment. He claimed to have $383 billion, yet when I looked at him, all I saw was sadness. I remarked, "What good is all the money when you're as unhappy as you are?" I proceeded to wrestle him to the floor as if we were children, making him laugh and showing him, regardless of my illnesses, I was still strong. It was only 2 weeks into our relationship, and he had told me about the rich having a cure for AIDS and a pill that enabled an individual to live forever for a mere $10 million. This pill I eventually found on the internet, but it disappeared as quickly as I found it. I believed it was called Regretadine by GlaxoSmithKline. Once I found it, I had a screenshot of it, and then it, disappeared off the internet completely. I couldn't find it ever again. That night we wrestled away our problems, and he tried to impregnate me. I remember the look in his eyes. It looked like that of love, not conquest, but the Antichrist's main efforts always related back to conquest, and I may not have been able to differentiate between the two. The attempted hit happened 5 days later. I bought the day after pill and never intended on having any children at all, let alone his, in such a short period of knowing him. February 4th, 2002 was my resurrection date. I remember it vividly. I had looked at him from across the room, across the kitchen table, and asked, "You tried to get me pregnant on purpose, didn't you?" I laughed when he looked at me with those big orb eyes and said yes. I began crying shortly after because I wanted to stay alive forever to take care of the plants and animals, and I wanted him to get me that pill because given the chance to live forever, I would take care of Earth eternally. I still thought I was going to hell and didn't want to. With that much money, I could do that and never worry about anything again, and I would never have to worry about going to hell again. I'd become so incredibly emotional because it was up to David to give me what I so desperately wanted, and I was so close to it, I could almost touch it. It was all I could ever have dreamed of, and I felt David was the key to everything I could have ever wanted. He was drunk off Malibu that was at the bed and breakfast when we arrived there. I wasn't much of a crier, but I was being hunted by demonic entities at the time and believed my fate was at their hands. Faithless, I fell to him, hoping for a miracle from what I thought was my little angel, when I was met with was two strikes. He mounted my body and asked if I liked to be hit before karate chopping me in the eye and then the temple, knocking me unconscious. He would later tell me that he was an MMA expert. I watched him from the corner of the room in an out-of-body experience, accompanied by Gaia, jump off my lifeless body and excuse himself to the bathroom as if I was just a rag doll. Upon waking up, I met him on the floor where he was vomiting profusely in the back bathroom to inform him of what he had done to me. He got up, gave me a hug, and apologized, and I, being as naive as I am, had no explanation for it at the time, accepted his apology. I had no idea that I was thought of as a vessel to harvest his seed for an end times takeover. He wanted a boy, and a boy I would have had, another Antichrist, although I didn't know that at the time either. I didn't know why I initially loved him so much. Something in the eyes, in his spirit, drew him to me. He told me that he hated his mother, who gave him up for adoption, and I wondered if he had it out for all women because of this. I tested him to see if he was willing to care for me the way I desired. We were back at his house, and at this point I wasn't close to home anymore. David told me he had woke up before me one day and asked who was here. He felt a presence. He said he heard Satan as a response. I had told David about the demons right away, and I felt comfort with him and had never felt that way with anyone else before. While we were at his house, he revealed to me that he was part of the 666 Club. He had told me that he wanted to marry me, but later exclaimed, "Do you think billionaires actually fuck their wives?" That was after letting me know that I was not a 10. I honestly didn't leave until he would drive me down home an hour and a half away to get my medication. Actions speak louder than words. And he wasn't willing to budge on the matter. He was willing to get me a taxi back and forth when all I really required was his time. He was obsessed with playing Call of Duty. Video games was where Hitler's obsession with gaming people came from. He told me that he once blew up the wrong town, and I looked at him and asked him, "With all your money, didn't you make sure that they had clean food and water?" He actually smirked about it, if you could believe it, but looked at me with empty eyes after I asked, as if no one ever held him accountable for his actions. I had had dreams of the Hitler fish, but for some reason I ignored it. I didn't see the obvious bad things about him. When I told him I was leaving and never coming back, he fell to his knees before me, but didn't beg or plead. I had never seen such a display, and he had confided in me not but a day before that he was a narcissistic sociopath. I tore away from him, packed my things, and got in the taxi cab. The whole way home, I told the driver that I had just encountered the most dangerous person in the world, and all about David. When I got home, I immediately felt the loss, even though I only knew him for a month. I even lost 20 pounds in a matter of weeks. I got the third COVID shot around this time and fell sound asleep in one of the recliners at my house. I was awakened by a massive access denied flashing in my head. I vomited for a week straight after this and found out that the government is always watching. The booster was supposed to give the government some kind of access that my system apparently rejected, and they were mad about it. I came to the conclusion that shots must be microchips and to read our minds, to read our souls, manipulate our DNA, and possibly reprogram our brains, amongst other things. I also knew that they contain graphene oxide, and when used in conjunction with ionized radiation, they can induce heart attacks. I had come to realize the government had been using manipulation on me for a long time. The ailments that I endured all my life were a part of a program. I could feel my neurotransmitters being manipulated. I felt my heart rate increase to the point where I had to lie down. They tried giving me a heart attack, and I told my body how to respond to counteract it. I talked to my neurotransmitters, increased my endorphins when I had pain, increased my dopamine and serotonin when I was feeling down. I could bring my body back down to homeostasis. I told my red blood cells to carry more oxygen to the brain if I was getting a headache, and it was all working marvelously. I started being able to control my body and took away power from them to do so. I've seen some of the information from the Gateway Project, which was a CIA endeavor. The document was declassified, and the code 51555 had to do with healing the body. You're supposed to imagine the area of your body that has pain and repeat 51555, and it's supposed to go away. It also discusses biofeedback, which has to do with talking to the body to control pain or conditions. I had gone to a bar in town a few times after I got home, as I wanted to just forget about David and the entire situation. He had love bombed me in the beginning, taking me to bed and breakfast for the first month, and once he got me to his house, basically told me how he was going to take advantage of me. On one occasion, a random man came up to me and was incredibly intoxicated. He began hitting on me, and I told him he should go home. He asked me again, and I responded the same way. He immediately sobered up and put his hand on my shoulder and told me to have a good night. Another man looked at me out of the corner of his eye, and I thought he might be reptilian watching me. I figured out all eyes were on me at this point. On another occasion, I went to the same bar just to decompress. This was the Shamrock in town. I was drinking a cherry Coke and just relaxing when a drop of water fell from out of nowhere and hit me smack in the middle of the forehead. I had been blessed, and I burst out laughing. I was told by the bartender he was going to throw me out if I continued to laugh, and I wondered if I was in the USSR. That particular bartender had thrown me out of the bar once before for standing up for myself to someone sexually harassing me. I laughed haughtily in his face, and he threw me out. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing, and as I said, all the people around you are programmed. Your reality is programmed by the top. I was eventually banned. This is when I was banned from this bar completely. I was never allowed to return after that. I was walking towards my ride home when I started speaking out loud. The soul's consciousness of the beings that are here on Earth are in the cosmos. I think. People are planets and stars, and when you talk aloud, you're directly talking to the souls. I shouted out at David because I knew that bullshit I had just experienced had to do with him and his father, not the blessing, being kicked out of the bar directly afterwards. They had some control over people's consciousnesses and were able to make things happen. I was so furious. I tried to send an email to a lawyer regarding David. I wrote that he was elite status and had abused me. I was gonna sue the fuck out of him for trying to kill me. I included that this involved my pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, and the email bounced back. I couldn't get it to send, so I downloaded Proton Mail, a supposedly encrypted mail carrier. I immediately received 15 attachments. I believed they had tried to send me kiddie porn in order to corner me, and I never went on that account again. I'd spent my whole life being careful and thinking the worst about people. It seemed to help me when it came to this matter. I had to think the worst to be able to be as cautious as I was with things. I didn't fully understand what was going on or why me until I looked up the Adam and Eve creation story. I read the biblical version and called bullshit, somewhere knowing inside me that it was rape in the garden by the fallen angels and not Eve's fault that the garden has become what it has. Our Earth is the Garden of Eden, and people have allowed it to fall apart due to greed and access to Sumerian technology. Or the Anunnaki technology. The eating of the apple in the garden was the fallen angels' eating of Eve's innocence. Adam was Lucifer, and his penis was the serpent. As I mentioned before, the fallen angels had raped Eve, and that was how humans came about. Reptilian mammalian hybrids. I stayed up late that night yelling at my phone, as I knew that there were areas of the government tasked with listening to us, and they were exactly who I wanted to talk to. I was angry at all the foolishness going on and the betrayal. This was back when the Ukraine war had just begun. My feeling about the war is that they went in for lithium for electric cars and to support Ukraine into giving up their independence and becoming part of NATO. I know the earthquake in Haiti had been planned so that America could mine uranium for spacecrafts, and so they could erect a World Bank there. I also think they went in for women and children in both Haiti and Ukraine. Part of the enigmatic beauty of Ukrainian women. Part of it is the enigmatic beauty of Ukrainian women. I know that they have cyborg wombs at this time, and harvesting eggs from Ukrainian women for future progeny on Mars is a possibility. For I believe the fallen angels intended on eradicating females completely just to harvest their own children in cyborg wombs to procreate with them, kind of like they had in the beginning. I later got word that FEMA camps had incinerators underneath them for this purpose, and I cried the hardest I ever cried in my life. Women were dependent on men in our society, if for nothing else, for love in the heterosexual sense, for fatherhood in another sense. This was evil, and it was one of the first times I was shaken up by about all this, because it was that big. As well, Silsby, this woman Silsby, she got caught with a bunch of Haitian children in a hotel room during the earthquake, recoup, like trying to fix it up. And she told authorities that she was a missionary of some sort, bringing them to a church to help them. She was really trying to sex traffic them. She was arrested, and the Clintons got her out and made her head of Amber Alert. I was still sick, and it was curses, machines, and microchips and rich assholes I was dealing with, which would mean that the higher-ups in the government were doing witchcraft with the likes of Lucifer and the Antichrist. My children and I was made to feel beaten down, and the Lucifer and the Antichrist, my children, and I was made to feel beaten down and inadequate my entire life. By this time, I had been raped multiple times and nearly killed by multiple people. I was furious that the Bible was written to mislead people and make women out to be harlots and betrayers. I was angry they made a male god out of some entity, and I was actually she who is called I am, and look at the kind of situation I'm in. In between feeling everything I never allowed myself to feel. I listened to songs that reflected my feelings, for how was I supposed to handle all this on my own, and how was I going to save everyone, save myself from what these people wanted to do to me, to you, to Earth? I heard a bunch of bells go off, I believe Liberty bells. I saw the crown of thorns on a blank television screen lift, and my headache stopped. I looked at my phone and it read, "Mom, I'm in Michigan with my cousins." I knew it was the Antichrist because David was from Michigan. This was so deep that David even had an accent as if he was from Toronto. My first love was a boy from Toronto, a family friend we met up with in Jamaica. It was all programmed perfectly. I started dancing around my living room happily, and then I started getting transmission from Lucifer as well. "Please stop" ran in white letters on black across the top of my phone. "Master" flashed on the screen with a question mark. I made it clear that I was just the spirit of a child who wanted to be free from illness and have fun. I told them they had 2 weeks to fix things before I went to the police. Captions then ran across the screen, "What if you get fat?" Satan knew that this was the only thing I was really afraid of other than catching HIV and going to hell. I gained 30 pounds within the next 2 months, which means they can slow your metabolism from a remote location. I'm also sure that they have fat replication technology, and they have something called feeders, men who like to feed their women, who can function through your hands to your mouth through the human experience. So something they call the human experience. I don't even think I can catch HIV, being that I'm not human. I yelled at the phone, telling them I would not join the Illuminati. David had told me not to talk bad about people like Donald Trump, because one day I could find myself sitting at the same table as them. I said, "You will never find me sitting at a table with those pieces of shit." It turns out they had tried to get my mom to join through a former student. They would have tried to make an Illuminati family out of us if they could. We value family time, and in the Illuminati you need to sacrifice loved ones to achieve greatness. I achieved my greatness by being good-hearted. Family is everything. I rarely cried in my lifetime. I finally lost it when I found out I was Earth and everyone's mother. Part of me was ashamed of everyone for the way they've acted. The other part of me was heartbroken that they'd sent someone to kill me who I loved so much. They always kill you with your love. I waited until my parents left the house and wailed out uncontrollably, ashamed of my children. I'd spent most of my life ashamed of myself or not being able to do like you do. But if I was able, the world would be a different place today. I would have ran for fucking president. Now, in between becoming ill due to the reptilians' control, I write this manifesto and can finally be proud of myself for saving you from the reptilians and the draconians and what they want for you. There are also alpha reptilians and alpha draconians. I didn't know that when I was writing this. Once I was calm, I saw captions run across the screen of my phone again. You have figured out all the secrets of the universe. I'm Santosh and Josh is with us. I threw my phone and told them to fuck off. If they were angels, they wouldn't have to stream captions across my phone. And I only had tidbits of information at this time. I certainly didn't know all the secrets of the universe. I was offended, and rightfully so. The Illuminati wanted me, and I vehemently told them I would never join them. I personally enjoy my freedom, and I had been through so much trauma at that point. My blood was on their hands, and they had been using trauma-based mind control on me, because that's what MK Ultra is. It's trauma-based mind control. I was putting pieces together and realizing I had been watched since birth. Nothing was a coincidence. I decided to order food in from a sushi place in town. I used Uber Eats. The driver didn't speak English and was Asian, and I thought for a split second they might poison me, but I threw caution to the wind. I took my first bite of sushi, my favorite, octopus, and my mouth, my throat, my sinuses, and my tongue blew up immediately. I exclaimed to my phone, "Did you poison my food?" "Yes. Pollen. Hay fever," came up in 3 separate lines on my phone, running in captions. This was what was shown on the screen of my Motorola afterwards. This pushed all skepticism about the situation out of my mind. I was who I was, and that was why the poison didn't work. You can't possibly poison Mother Earth with her own earth. I later come to figure out I'm Mother Nature, not just Mother Earth. The next morning, I woke up to my arm hanging and my back broken. I could feel that the bones were all out of place, almost like plate tectonics shifting. My back was broken in multiple places. I burst out laughing. I said, "With all the abuse I have taken, this is how you're going to try and get me?" I went on laughing maniacally. They really knew nothing about making good relations. Eventually, they grew tired of me laughing at them and someone fixed my back. I think it may have been the Pleiadians, as they have the gift of healing. I felt all the plates go back to their prior position, and I felt right as rain. Or it was my consciousness. It could have been my consciousness fixing me. Thinking they wouldn't try and poison me twice in 1 week, I ordered chili rellenos from another restaurant in my hometown, and in one bite, my arm went numb. A neurotoxin was creeping its way up to my heart. I think it was rattlesnake poison or that of a black widow or a combination. I manifested an antidote and danced it off and seemed to be fine come morning. I was simply trying to make sense of the situation at that point and didn't realize I was manifesting my own safety and in reality had all protection against anything the powers that be could have done to me. The protection of the angels and Mother Nature, my soul's consciousness. I had so quickly become the most powerful being amongst men. I believe they wanted me dead since birth, and that was why my life was so hard. I'd been talking to my friend John for a while. I was trying to get over David, and I decided to send him some racy pictures. I dressed up in lingerie, posed, and took a photo. It literally took a picture of the opposite side of my room. I hadn't reversed the frame, and I tried again. Same result. I felt a rod pounding in my leg, and I exclaimed, "Lucifer, no." The rod pounded up and down on my leg, all around my pelvic area, and I burst out laughing. It felt the way a hard penis would feel if it was the essence of a penis, a spirit rod. I laughed hysterically. I now knew what this was all about. Sex with me. I went to the hospital to get a report about David. Even though it was a month later, I wanted a doctor to look at me. I had a lazy eye from the trauma, and the doctor checked my vision. I told him I got hit, and he told me he didn't want to hear any of it. He didn't even want to know why I was there. He didn't even know anything about my injury, and as he wouldn't even listen to what had happened to me. He was completely uninterested in the situation because he walked away before I could get a word in about it. I sat in the room hoping to get some documentation of the incident, and they shut the lights off in the entire wing. I was getting an idea of who the Antichrist was and what he could make happen. I went to the police after 2 weeks and described the encounters. I told them that David was an elite and detailed everything. I told them about the pill that made you live forever and how he knew things he shouldn't know. I provided them with a report of my vision, which showed that I needed a different prescription for my left eye due to the damage, and a hospital report of my lazy eye. They told me I hadn't had an appointment in over a year, and that wasn't good enough evidence. I had accidentally gone to the wrong police departments, mixed the two locations up. I didn't realize it at the time that they had switched the memories in my brain. I told them that the elites target poor women for progeny, and they brought in a mental health person to ask me if I was okay. It is as if no one understands or wants to understand what they are hearing. They completely ignored the reports, and David later told me that they contacted him about the unlawful impregnation and asked him if he did anything I didn't want him to do. He simply responded with a no, and it was all dropped. The majority of police are part of a hive mind scenario as well, the Masonry. I was convinced David was some sort of CIA agent sent to kill me, and the police are owned by the Masons. He had no furniture in his apartment, no dishes other than pots and pans, and only about enough clothes to get him through maybe a week at a time if he rewore them. I found the 666 statutes on Cornell University website. One of them was about reserve officers not on duty. I started to think maybe the military used David in a covert operation unbeknownst to him. He was retired, but once a soldier, always a soldier. When you make yourself government property, they can truly do whatever they want with you. As well, the military use of 11 to 13 vaccines. I believe these vaccines all have mind control in them. Most of the women I encountered who were married to the military had husbands that cheated on them. David was a self-admitted cheater, but he said he was too old to cheat any longer. I started to wonder if David had been programmed to kill me, and I started to feel badly for him. I felt David was one of the most unlovable people there ever was, magnificent in all the wrong ways. I did a background check on David, and on it were 8 interfering with domestic violence charges. He was also on a Navy watch list. He was on a government watch list just like his dad. I took to TikTok and began making his dad's avatar anyway. Or one of them. I took to TikTok and began making videos of everything. At first I made dance videos to attract viewers and clips of me talking, little anecdotes. I even went to the supermarket one day and started to make videos on all the holistic things I knew. I knew for IBS, fresh ginger root and honey tea is good for the gut. It's also good for anxiety. For arthritis, you can drink tart cherry juice concentrate. For inflammation. For allergies, you get organic local honey. When buying spinach, because it's so porous, you must get organic so that you're not just eating pesticide. I gained followers quickly and went live. I used it as a place to spread positivity and my story, being that the police were of no help. I later found out that the police are owned by the Freemasons. I was getting about 60 to 80 people on a live at a time. I started duetting videos and gained even more followers. I saw a video of Whoopi Goldberg asking if the Savior is out there, say something. I responded with, "Hi, it's me." The creator messaged me a phone number, and I began to text me. One of the first messages was, "What do you want?" I responded, "World peace, bitches," and I got no further replies. Chapter 12. I took an Uber out to someone's house to try and get over David. I wanted someone to want me for some reason, as David had left me feeling a bit rejected even though I left him. I never did that before, the whole getting under someone to get over someone. Jeff told me when I got there that he was a sex offender and he'd been charged with rape. He explained to me that it was anything but it was because he had ejaculated in her without her consent. Sound familiar? I ended up hooking up with him thinking it would just be better for me if I wasn't pushed into it. I didn't have enough money to Uber home and I didn't want to call anyone and tell them the situation. I felt stupid for even being there, almost like I deserved it because that's how they wanted me to feel. He ejaculated in me without my consent and told me it was okay because he got a vasectomy. I had told him specifically not to. He had also told me his ex said he was a narcissist, which rings completely true from later encounters with me trying to tell him I was never going to be with him again, and he just didn't seem to understand. Incidentally, the lights were flicked on while I was engaging in coitus with him, so at least I knew I pissed Lucifer off. Even though he knew I didn't like what was happening, he was there watching, jealous even. There was a car outside his house the entire time watching us. He had thought someone hired a private detective to watch him, but I knew it was government stuff that had to do with me. They had already parked their car across from my kitchen and shined their lights into the window while I was dancing. It was hardly inconspicuous. The Illuminati had started sending me messages offering me membership. The PFP of one of them was a poorer-looking woman with children, because of what I had said to the police about the elites using poor women to harvest their progeny. I think I had wanted to say aliens, but didn't. The line that stuck out most to me in this message was, "We don't eat babies." And "we don't sacrifice children," is what it said. I remember collapsing in my mother's arms. "They eat babies, Mom," hysterically crying. That was after they tried to get me to recruit me telepathically, which is how they do things nowadays, before you get signed in real life. You sign an astral contract. I was sitting in the kitchen when my consciousness got dragged down into my chest cavity. There were big doors covered in skeletal remains and innards that were shut to keep the sounds of the screams out upon me entering. Brock was there with his mother. It was a large room with even larger ceilings. I started making hot tea for both as his mother started talking to me. She said God tried to get me to have a three-way. A booming voice called me a whore and basically told me to get out of there. I ran out of there as fast as I could, and I made my way back up to my skull where my consciousness was prior to that. Something kept trying to drag me down there. It was like my brain was a piece of butter and it was sliding down my throat into hell. I started seeing Brock with toasters that read MK Ultra on them, aiming them all inside my body. I became hot like my insides were burning up. I heard people and saw them lined up in my chest saying, "We can hear you, we can hear you." I was under the impression that it was a ploy, and they were trying to get into my head, when in fact they were screaming for salvation. I dumped what looked like a scaffolding that they were standing on, but they just made their way back up, screaming for me. They were the slaves calling out for me from inside my body, which seemed like a massive hell. No wonder why I was so sickly. Dreams of Hitler fish swam through my mind in my slumber. I saw clones of human hybrid fish, men, and they were all David. When he ran out of money, he went to shore to re-up on cryptocurrency. He had told me he was a crypto master and went back to his life feeding off women for sex and coddling. Fenn's treasure had been found by the Illuminati in a dream. It's a poem where if you find the treasure, it's like leads to a treasure. Fenn's treasure had been found by the Illuminati in the dream and was under this massive living brush that would grab you and sweep you away if you weren't a David. At one point I saw them coming out of a portal in my basement as fledgling fish, but were to develop into Davids. I went through a watery portal, and the likes of Ninja and Yolandi Visser of D. Antwoord were shopping there, and there was a massive fountain. In this hell, we're all shopping. In this hell, we're all shopping malls and fountains. Hitler had put some sort of rigged blade in me that was to spin forever, slicing me from the inside out in my stomach if I were to get wet. Brock was there in a beautiful purple gown, drag from head to toe. He led me into a big opulent fountain, and the blade spun halfway before breaking. Brock took me to a hotel room, and he was trying to hide that he was sliced up too because I was. I was recuperating in a bed while he was showering in healing waters. He wanted to keep me there, hurt, so I needed him when he really needed me. He left me there, and an entity joined me, a tiny squid-like creature attached itself to my sternum. I had something like a skin suit on, and it was going to deteriorate if I went in the water. When I woke up, I was afraid to even shower. These people in the hierarchy have been taken over by entities. I could not be, as I refused to join them. In the Bible, there is evidence in Revelations that there are 153 antichrists in end times. The 153 fish that Jesus catches, the real Jesus, Mary Magdalene. I went into a possessed state and made my way naked down to the basement with a knife. Only my mother was home, and I didn't even see her when passing her in the hallway. I spent most of my time topless at the pool and never thought much of being naked. I had gone directly to the portal I saw in my dreams, but saw nothing on the ground around it. The area was swimming with Hitler fish in my dreams. Plus, I didn't think anyone was up. And my mom happened to be up. My heart was pounding out of my chest. Something was trying to give me a heart attack. I saw a male god trying to hold me in his arms in the garden. I kept slipping through, and Lucifer was dragging me to hell. I dug my heels into the dirt. My feet grew almost as large as the garden itself, as a truck dragged me out of the garden to a house, where I was then dragged underground and chained to a wall with a doggy bowl in front of me. The wall was covered in innards and skeletons. I so desperately tried to stay in God's arms, in the God's arms, and he told me I needed to take medication for my condition, which was causing me not to be able to stay put while he held me. This was a false god. I was dragged out of his arms as a little baby, bouncing around to hell repeatedly, all while I was nearly having a heart attack, and I ended up going to the hospital. I was in the backseat of a police car. They actually handcuffed me. Once I got to the hospital, while I was waiting to be admitted, I was surrounded by men in gray robes. Outside, there were all women in white robes praying for me to holding candles. I felt like I was going to die and had no idea what I said to the doctors, if anything. I was in an almost comatose state and completely blacked out for the first few days I was there. This would become common for me when being admitted in the future. I was told later that I pulled out an imaginary chair from an imaginary desk and went to sit on it, falling on the floor. I would just completely black out due to the programming and seem like I was in a psychotic state when I was being possessed. If you didn't know, the white pope was Francis, the black pope was Sosa, and the gray pope was Orsini. And Orsini the gray pope is the most powerful. So the men in gray robes were some of notoriety in the hierarchy. Wearing gray, I think, classifies them in wizardry. They were trying to kill me with witchcraft, but did not succeed. Lucifer, as Brock, slept next to me in a different dimension. He was beneath me in what looked like a system of subways. He said he was taking me to go see our daughter. They lived in a building that was a series of pods. I spent the day with her. She was making clothes in a 3D printing machine. She filled up a pool with water, and upon entering, her legs turned into the tentacles of black octopus. She went swimming, and I watched her. She was absolutely stunning. Upon leaving, he said he left his bag full of cryptocurrency, which was something tangible in the dreams, in the apartment, and tried to get me to go back in to get it. The cryptocurrency he was talking about was in some kind of sea seed shells. When you broke it open, these containers fell out that had gold coins in them that were worth a lot. I saw him turn on a pump, and he was planning to flood the pods with water with me inside them. I told him to go get them himself, and he refused. I wondered if I died in my dreams or visions, would I die in real life? I ended up in a place the same evening that was filthy. There was a train that had stopped there and was not in service. There were many men and children. I don't remember seeing any females other than myself there. I decided to start cleaning. Brock, as Lucifer, put his head in his hands as I began cleaning up the place. All the people there were sick, but they decided to clean alongside me. We planted flowers where there had been nothing but garbage, and the plants began to flourish. There was no clean water before, but by the time we were finished, the water that was flowing through the place was clean and drinkable. Lucifer didn't help but watched as the once sad and defeated land became a place of hope. The train started running again, and people were boarding to go to what I imagined was heaven at the time, or a ride to reincarnation. And this place was no longer a purgatory or hell, but was a place of peace that was pleasant for anyone to be. It was no longer a desolate place of sickness. I flew above this area with a god who said he was my father, as they wanted me to believe that there was a male god above me. And I took Lucifer with me to remind him of what it was like to fly. The system of gods, which I put in quotations because they're not really gods, there are demigods, had become monotheistic since Eve's rape. That's not true. There are demigods. So the reason there are demigods is because the real God, who was Eve, was an incarnation. It was the first incarnation of Eve, was Mother Nature, and her children betrayed her, and demigods were born. You see, when Eve was raped, there were spells put on her to entrap her, and other entities took the godship. There are some good, some bad, but Gaia and her incarnations are the one true God. That is why I put gods in quotations. Once I got to what they said was heaven, the bottoms of my feet turned beet red. I was not allowed to stay in heaven because of how much time I spent in hell cleaning the entities there alluded to, because there were more than just the male god who flew me there. Some of my stuff is a little weird because I was under mind control, so I don't know what I was trying to say there, but I wonder what kind of gods they were telling me that helping people was not righteous. There seemed to be many more like that one I had flown with. I woke up shortly after a battle and was supposed to stab Brock, but couldn't at first, for I felt bad for him for some reason, and the knife turned into a butter knife in my hand and wouldn't pierce his skin. A massive battle ensued before me, and I tried to find him again and accidentally stabbed the wrong person. This time I had a dagger in my hand. I didn't know why we were fighting, and I didn't understand. I couldn't see very well either. I heard I hurt someone fighting on our team, and I felt very badly, but all I saw were these massive godlike creatures that looked like they were made out of clouds. We were in a zoo of some sort, and I freed the animals to fight. One of them was what looked like a saber-toothed tiger. They were giant. They were celestial beings in a fight with me against that of Lucifer and Satan that I knew, but I was here on Earth desperately trying to see what had been fogged by the vaccines. I came out of it shortly after, just to be taken by another vision. Lucifer came to me again. He tried to get me to kiss him and told me his name was Christian. He had curly blonde surfer hair and a built physique. When he said he was part of the cabal was when I said, "You're a Satanist," and realized who he was. When I didn't succumb, he showed me Mr. Rothschild. He was with his family on a float of some sort, cruising through town. He actually showed me my parents with the Rothschilds, but I don't know if that was like just to sway me or something to go with him. I'm not really sure what that was all about. He was with his family on a float of some sort, cruising through town. His niece said something snarky to him and began playing a piano that had razor blades for strings. He took her hand, shoved it in the razor blades, and completely mangled it. It clipped to me being Anne Frank's consciousness in a box. I witnessed him doing many occult practices and magic from another room in his house. I was terrified as Anne. The house was bustling with parties, then became destitute, as it seemed they had run low on money. His 3 nieces lived there, the 3 witches, and the one who had a mangled hand had grown uglier than the rest. At one point I was put in the bathtub and watched her cry. I even felt her sadness. To my horror, her leg fell off while I was there, and she tried desperately to reattach it. Their skin began falling off, and they used these thin stockings to hold on not only their skin, but their limbs on their bodies. The house became a recording studio in the 70s, and they began to flourish again, changing their appearance with the times, and eventually got so much plastic surgery they looked like the Kardashians if they were melting. I eventually found out that the Rothschilds were part of the Cotton Club, an outfit that was for slave masters and traders. Another night, I awoke in a dream surrounded by mentally disabled people that were overweight and plagued by a lack of intelligence. We were hanging upside down on a plane, all with garbage bags covering our bodies. It was freezing and they began vomiting all over the place and themselves. It seemed like a means of entertainment for people watching, as you could feel eyes on you at all times. We took a bus ride home where they offered me spoiled milk, chicken, and eggs. I was aware that they were chicken-human hybrids, an experiment gone wrong. Some of them had a large chest area like a chicken and arms that went into something that looked like a claw of some sort that was underdeveloped. One of them said right out he was going to rape me when we got back to the farm that they lived at. I became scared and started talking to them, as that's what I would do when I'm afraid. Excessive speech. I came to find out that the males raped the females regularly and beat them when they were frustrated. Some of the women began coming to me for counseling, and then the men came as the women were protesting their attacks. We began mediation and then began revamping their agriculture. We had animals on the farms, and I had seminars on how to care for the animals, how to milk the cows, and make real mills so that they didn't have to cannibalize themselves anymore. The original sideshow became a community, and they began to flourish and even change form. They developed differently, even physically, and were grateful for my presence. We all ate together, and I provided them with therapy of all sorts. They no longer raped each other or the chickens. There were no more assaults, and I was proud of them for all the strides they had made. One day the governor threw them a barbecue, and she brought her very well-dressed children. I was offended by everything she was. They would normally only have meat at this one time a year. I went up to her, giving her a piece of my mind, and walked away. Thereafter, I left the Lily-Poke chicken people to become something greater, as they had exceeded my expectations beyond anything I could imagine. Upon returning to the farm, there were just 2 men there. I asked what happened, and I was told the governor burned their coop to the ground. Like their whole farm, like everything. Not the farm, the area that we used to dine in. It had the animals in it. I was told I did everything I could for them, and one of their spirits visited me and told me she missed me and loved me for what I did for them, and they had ascended greatly because of me. I woke up in tears. The Lily-Poke chicken people were thought of as disgusting, and the elites watched them in their former rituals for entertainment. Once the entertainment was over, they weren't worth anything to them anymore, and they didn't want them becoming part of polite society, so they killed them. So, like, there are different dimensions, and there's cameras everywhere in these dimensions, and, like, elites watch the different dimensions and, like, bet on people in these different dimensions and make fun of them and all sorts of stuff. I had dreams of being taken back in time. I was with my family. I was back to the days of Queen Elizabeth I, and we were spies. We hid in dark corners with fellow members and evaded her henchmen while sending letters underground to the rebellion. It wasn't the first time my family members were in visions. I had a reoccurring dream of my father taking me to a place where there was a dark black water. We would canoe through it and through these massive rock formations that had a series of caves and tunnels inside them. It looked like a place you would find buried treasure, and later I went searching for it and I found treasure in one of the underwater caves and brought it up to the angels for their protection. That was always one of my favorite dreams, as I felt he was showing me his secret place, and it was a secret place for him and I. Right before I had gone to the hospital, I had also had a dream of a man who looked like a god. He said he was my father as well, with me at the White House. I went off on my own and chased Obama and Trump throughout the whole building. They were on their way to a meeting with China and ran from me, but I didn't understand why. We were wearing helmets that had a screen of some sort to block in them to block MK Ultra. At the end of the dream, I accidentally put the MK Ultra screen the wrong way and shut down that god's consciousness. He was happy and passed the torch on to me, smiling all the way. I mentioned MK Ultra to the doctor, and he informed me that I couldn't leave the hospital believing in it. It is not just all over the internet. It is the declassified CIA information. It must have been because the MK Ultra project started in psychiatric hospitals, as they are part of a massive cover-up. To this day, the medication they are giving you for psychiatric disorders is part of an MK Ultra program. I watched the video of a girl possessed by demons, and the demon through her expressed that once you're on medication, you're theirs. In what capacity, I don't know. I know that it tends to make concentration and astral projection more difficult, but not impossible for me. For others, I'm sure that's what it does. I also know that medications have witchcraft in them that suppress your abilities. Black magic, pharmakia, it's in the Bible. Psychiatric disorders and some illnesses are actually possessions, as astral projectors or astral walkers are vulnerable to demon attacks on the astral plane. I don't even think doctors know they are part of the nefarious plot to have all of us implemented into the MK Ultra project. They think that they're helping us. Their schooling tells them so, and they take an oath, apparently, to, like, wherever they don't have to give you medication to not give you medication, but people can change their diet and reduce their blood pressure, so there's a lot of discrepancies with these oaths. All pharmaceuticals allow you to be programmed to a certain extent, programming depending on how much and how many medications you're on and how many vaccines you have taken. Some of the medication messes with dopamine levels of patients and makes them unhappy. Like psychiatric medications do that to you. They make you depressed, so you have to take antidepressants on top of them. The psychiatrists will then try and give you antidepressants and pump you full of even more black magic. Schizophrenics are simply on the verge of a breakthrough and sometimes caught between dimensions. Masons use symbols and numerology, but when you're poor, the use of symbols and numbers is considered schizophrenic. I assessed bipolar disorder as due to the government magnetizing the poles. Any way you cut it, it all leads back to the government, a satanic entity, and demons, reptilians. I believe reptilians are demons. Many of the symbols of America are satanic in nature, including the Pentagon and the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty I have seen in many visions and is always a symbol of evil. That's not actually true. I've seen it in visions recently, and it was a symbol of hope. But it was made the torch carrier. It was supposedly like a statue, like dedicated to Lucifer, bringing people to America, promising liberty and actually enslaving them. Some people believe there is a massive gravesite underneath the Statue of Liberty. It was said that, like, there was a stench coming from it. In the Pentagon, you can fit the 5-point star. In the Pentagon, you can fit the 5-point star, the pentagram. And that's where I'll stop. And I'll go into chapter 13 next time. Thank you.